Okay, in this video, I want to go over the idea of a ratio. All a ratio does is compare two quantities. And they're different quantities typically. And because of that, we normally want to be sure that we label everything when we do ratios. For example, if you go to the grocery store, you might see that apples cost, and I'm totally making this up, $1.35 per pound. That's a ratio. That tells you that the cost, $1.35, is for 1 pound of apples. That's not the only way you could write that ratio. We could multiply that by 10 and say, $13.50 will buy you 10 pounds of apples. Maybe I better put apples there. If you want to have the number 1 on the top, which sometimes they do, if we took that and we divided by $13.50 on the top and on the bottom, that's how you reduce a fraction, we would get $1. 10 divided by $13.50 will buy you 0.74 pounds of apples. All of those are equal ratios. $1.35 divided by 1 or $13.50 divided by 10. If you do $1.35 divided by 1, you of course get $1.35. If you do $13.50 divided by 10, of course you get $1.35. If you do 1 divided by 0.74, you get $1.35. So all of those are the same. Now, the lesson that we're dealing with talks a lot about population density. In this case, you're comparing population, which is the number of people, to the area. So for example, if you know that you have a population of 157,000 people, and they live in an area that is 26.8 square miles, then we get a population density that is equal to 157,000 people over 26.8 square miles. Usually we just divide and get that as a number with a decimal, 157,000 divided by 26.8. It comes out to be pretty dense. That's 5,858 people. We're going to round it to the nearest whole number of people per square mile. That's all a population density is. There's all kinds of ratios that we might use. We talk about gas mileage in terms of a ratio. Gas mileage tells us the number of miles per gallon. anytime you're reading something and you see this word per, think divide or divided by. So to get gas mileage, we do the number of miles divided by the I'm sorry, I said that exactly backwards. No, I didn't. Divided by the number of gallons. If you have a car that can travel 526 miles and you have a gas tank that holds 18 gallons, so on one tank of gas, it'll go 526 miles, that's 18 gallons. 526 divided by 18, and that car is getting 29.2 miles per gallon. So it's very important when you're looking at ratios that you label things and understand when it's something per something, you are dividing. The 5,858 people per square mile. You're taking the number of people and you're dividing it by the square miles. You can write more than one ratio with the same information. I could ask the question, how many gallons does it take to travel 1 mile? Well, 18 gallons allows you to travel 526 miles. If I do 18 divided by 526, I get it takes 0.034 gallons per mile. So it will take 34 thousandths of a gallon of gas to travel 1 mile. Let's get another way we can think about ratios. Let's see. At the shelter, there were 83 cats, including kittens, and 29 dogs. There were no other animals. So this is a shelter that only accepts cats and dogs. What is the ratio of cats to dogs? When you see a ratio of cats to dogs, that means cats goes first. 83 cats, 29 dogs. 83 divided by 29. And the ratio is that there's 2.86 cats per dog. For every 1 dog, there were almost 3 cats. You could do it the other way. What's the ratio of dogs to cats? That's going to be the reciprocal. 29 dogs, 83 cats. 29 divided by 83 is about 0.35 dogs per cat. Now, we can actually solve some other questions if we take into account that we have 83 cats, 29 dogs, for a total of 112 animals. Now, in thinking of terms of percents, you can think of this as being a part. You can think of this being a part. You can think of this being a whole. We wouldn't talk about 29 as a percentage of 83 or 83 as a percentage of 29 because they're two separate parts. But we can talk about other ratios as percents. What is the ratio of cats to the animal population? At the shelter. And you can say, well, there's 83 cats. The animal population is 112 animals. That's 0.741 cats out of the animals. But in this case, we would be more inclined to make it a percent and say that is 74.1% of the animals are cats. Similarly, we know there's 29 dogs. That's the part. There's 112 animals. That's the whole. If we do that as a decimal, that's 0.259. But if we make it a percent, or 25.9% of the animals are dogs. Obviously, if you add those two together, 74.1, 25.9, we get 100%. That accounts for all of the animals at this shelter. Okay, I think let's do one other idea. Let's do a population density question, but instead of using miles, square miles, let's suppose, if I can find where it is, if the shelter has 38 cages, what's the population density in animals per cage? In other words, we have a total of 112 animals. Remember, sometimes kittens and puppies share cages with each other or with their parent, and we have a total of 38 cages. That tells us that on average, there must be 2.9 animals per cage, or about 3 animals in each cage. Okay, so the important thing to remember with ratios is you're just comparing two things. You want to be able to label them so you know what you're comparing. Most of the time, we will just take this and divide it out. However, there are other ways we could write this 2.9 animals per cage. If I want to, I can divide the numerator by 112 and say there's one animal, and then I can divide the bottom by 112. If I do 38 divided by 112, I get 0.259. 3, 4 cages. That makes sense. Each animal gets about a third of a cage. Each cage has about 3 animals. Okay, I think this is a good place. I'm going to make a quiz over ratio and proportion. It'll be up sometime fairly soon.